As we continue with our study of the book of Genesis, we look this evening at this particular session at chapters 37 and 38, and we finally get to the Joseph story. In fact, we are told this is the story of the family of Jacob, and so there's kind of a brand new point here that's identified by that, even though we see some of the context that goes back before it. The two major stories that we will have for this particular session, the story of Joseph and his brothers, and then the story of Judah and Tamar. As we look at the story of Joseph, we find that it does not mention at this point that his mother has already died, but we are told simply that Joseph was loved particularly because he was the child of Jacob in Jacob's old age. There has been a lot of discussion, of course. I'm sure everyone knows about Joseph and his amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat and Joseph and his coat of many colors. The reason for all of the discussion on that particular issue is the fact that most likely when the Greek translators, the Jewish people who knew Greek, translated the Bible into what's called the Septuagint in the 200s before Christ, so roughly 17 or so 100 years after this particular story, they did not know what that word meant, or at least they made a guess at it, and they used the word poikilioi in Greek, which means many colored. But the general understanding that has come since that time, and a study that has been done of various depictions of archaeological evidence that was not available to people at the time of the King James Version, suggests that it's probably a coat with long sleeves. And in the scholarly discussion, they go back and forth about what it really is supposed to be. The most likely idea is this is your tuxedo versus the bib overalls that the other brothers would be wearing. Joseph is favored. He is treated very specially by his father, and that is automatically going to bring the hatred of the others. Notice how the discussion, even though Simeon and Judah are sons of Levi, how it talks about the wives, Bilhah and Zilpah, unlike the Leah and Rachel story now where those are the servant girls in earlier parts of the discussion. Now it just says that those are among his wives, and that those brothers particularly were very irritated with Joseph. Until I began to do the teaching of the evening college classes, I always thought of Joseph as kind of an innocent and naive young fellow, but the students who read those stories pointed out, the evening college students pointed out that there is a kind of a harshness or a sharpness about Joseph here. It's sort of like he's nagging his brothers or egging them on when he is not in the presence of his father. He is very definitely with his nose in the air and acting as if he is the most important brother because of this favored status that he has. Sometimes people will talk about a sibling rivalry, and that's a rather common popular term today from psychology that talks about the fight between various brothers or members of a family, usually particularly with brothers toward other brothers and sisters toward other sisters, or sometimes in terms of the favoritism of one parent or another. But I think the matter goes a little bit deeper here. Though it is not discussed in great detail, we remember that Joseph is the son of the favorite wife, Rachel, and will also have a special place in the heart of his father because that's the girl that Jacob chose when he first got to his uncle Laban's house. And so, as we look at this story now, part of the question is how are we going to find out who's going to be the most important of the brothers? Which one is going to be the one who is going to be the head of the family? We would certainly suspect it would have to be somebody before son number 11, and yet Joseph is the one who will win out in the end. He will show his wisdom. He will not do the great wickedness and sin against God. But at the beginning of the story, he is seen as this brash 17-year-old. The other brothers, of course, are all older and are not really very taken with the fact that he is getting this special treatment. and he compounds it by having a couple of dreams. Dreams where the discussion revolves around how everyone else, including his father and mother, are going to bow down and worship him. Little interesting comment that Jacob keeps all these things. It's almost like he keeps all these things and ponders them in his heart as he reflects on this later. But the main point of it here is that God in advance was giving a sort of a hint of what actually would take place, and the brothers did their best to try to stop that from happening, to keep him from being the head of the family, and then later, of course, that happens anyway. And so Joseph, who is living with his father down in Hebron, down at this time where Isaac had lived, where Abraham had lived, and where Abraham and Isaac were both buried. And the brothers, during the spring and summertime of the year, would have to wander a little farther away from the place that they were more permanent, looking for pasture land. It's a very common thing that at the Passover time, the spring of the year, both the grasses begin to dry out as the rain quits coming, and so those who are shepherds have to go a little farther away to find grass land to pasture their flocks. But at the same time, that drying out is what causes the barley to ripen and be able to be harvested, and then the wheat right after that, which is why we have both a feast of unleavened bread, which is some of that brand new bread that doesn't have yeast in it, and also at the same time the animals would have been sacrificed way far before the time of the Israelites, even as the shepherds went out looking for pasture elsewhere, and it was apparently a common practice that they would sacrifice an animal and hope that the deities, the gods that they worshipped, would watch out for them and would know that they were seeking help. Of course, those two events will be given new meaning when the Exodus takes place. But at this time, as the brothers are wandering, they first go north, and I believe our notes say that it's around 50 miles from Hebron up to Shechem, and then another 15 miles or so farther north yet to go to Dothan, where he finally finds his brothers. The entire setting lets us know that he's very, very far away from his father, that many, many things can happen, and it is maybe not all that surprising in the final analysis that that Jacob would have thought that Joseph was killed by an animal. Certainly there were many opportunities for that to happen along the way. The fact that he is thrown down into a pit, what would happen is it's not as if you drilled down to get to water that you would all of a sudden fall into some big underground cavern. What the people would do in various areas is they would dig a hole and they would dig down hoping to reach water, and if they were lucky enough they would reach water and it would kind of seep out from the rock. That's a well, but a pit may, here in this case, or a cistern, may simply be a hole that was dug at the place where water was kind of running down from some valleys, and in the rainy season then that pit would fill up. Now of course we're at the springtime of the year as the brothers are out looking for pasture. You don't have rain, and so those holes into which they'd never get far enough to reach the water, those are now simply empty, and they would be used to catch the rainwater and be useful for half of the year, but rather useless in this half of the year. So he is thrown down there, and at first they're going to leave him there to die. Reuben is hoping that he can pull him out later, and what for me is at least a bit of a confusing narrative about whether these are Ishmaelites or Midianites, and the notes suggest that the Midianites are part of a larger Ishmaelite group. It's a little bit kind of bumpy when we read that part of the story, at least for me, about exactly who was doing what. But Joseph is sold, taken into slavery, and taken down into Egypt, and as he is taken away, then some money is paid for him. His brothers are able to try to let their father make an inference. They don't directly say, your boy is dead. They say, Dad, look at the coat. Isn't this the coat of our brother Joseph, your son Joseph? At that point, the dreams, which were seen as a way in which God could communicate, those dreams didn't seem to have any bearing any longer, and would have been considered as nothing but foolishness or gibberish. But the brothers leave their father with the impression that the boy's been killed. They happened upon the coat, and in fact, they had actually just killed an animal and poured the blood on the coat and then brought it to their father. I've always wanted to, in my own kind of mischievous or devious way, I've often wished that I could be in the tent when the brothers come back from Egypt that second time and have to admit to their father what they really had done, that they had seen to it that their brother was sold and taken away from them, and they knew all along that he wasn't dead. But obviously the brothers never thought they were going to see their brother again, and certainly not as the second command in all the land of Egypt. And we'll talk a little bit more about that part of the story when we get back to the Joseph story. We find out here simply that he is sold to the man named Potiphar, who is a royal official for the Pharaoh, and that he is in service to that man in his own house. So he's still a young boy, but he is now removed from the scene at the moment, and if we're looking for narrative technique, we would certainly assume that this is the end of the line for Joseph. Most slaves do not become real important later on. One major interruption now in the Joseph story explains why Judah, who later is actually going to be the chief tribe, remember that David comes from the tribe of Judah, and of course Jesus by extension also comes from the tribe of Judah. But it's not as if the Bible is trying to show these people in just their most favorable light. We've seen enough of that by now. And so first of all, we've seen that the brothers have acted wickedly toward their brother, just as they had acted wickedly toward their father when Reuben and Simeon and Levi have all done something against their father, and then the other brothers against their brother. Now Judah is also going to do something that's against the family. First of all, he marries someone who is a foreigner. He goes down into the southern region and departs from his family a bit. We're not told his wife's name here. His father-in-law's name is Shua, and we are told that he marries and that the marriage is blessed with 3 children, and Onan and Shelah. Now, is the oldest one, who is married to Tamar, whose name means a date palm tree, so Tamra, a very important name in that part of the world, just because of the fact that the date palm was so important as food that could be taken with people when they were traveling. This Tamar then becomes a very young widow. Her husband dies. It says that the Lord was angry with him and slew him. Again, this gets to make us feel a bit uncomfortable that God would be out killing people. That is a way in which they verbalize the fact this fellow died much too young, and he must have done something against God for that to happen. The normal custom is what in Latin is called the law of the Levir, Levir, or the Levirate law, and that is something that is still practiced today in many cultures, the Hmong culture as well, and that is that if your brother died and he had no children, then you were responsible to have sexual relations with your sister-in-law, and the first child, male child, normally that would be born to that relationship, would then inherit the property of your brother. Onan does not want this to happen. We are told, was he fighting with his brother, or did he simply not want to have to follow through with this, or did he somehow have a dislike for the sister-in-law? None of that is mentioned, but we are told that Onan spilled the semen on the ground. So in other words, instead of having sex with her, then he simply shames her by saying, I'm not going to put the seed inside of you. I don't want this to result in a pregnancy and in a birth for my brother. And so we're told God slays him as well. Again, the same kind of a thing that one would assume that such a custom would be abhorrent to God, and yet here the text describes it that God said this is the way the family line keeps going, and this system was one that they had come up with, and so um, God is also unhappy with him. I might just say, by the way, that many people have often related the idea of masturbation here to onanology. It's the name for that, and said that that particular physical activity is one that would bring great wrath down from people from God, as it did with Onan. That might be a little bit too much to read into this, but that terminology is used in a lot of the older psychology textbooks. Well, anyway, Judah has one more son, Shelah, Shelah, not a girl's name, but a male name here. We don't know how old he is. Apparently, at the initial time when his two brothers died, he was not old enough to be a father yet. But even after he does get to be of age, his father, Judah, still does not give him to Tamar. And we note also the custom that Tamar goes back home to her father. Well, she's waiting, she's watching, and when Shelah is not sent, she decides to take matters in her own hand. And so when Judah is going out with a man named Hira from Adullam, and there are caves of Adullam in the southern region of what's later known as Judah, the southern part of the country, as Judah is going to shear his sheep, she sits by the gate of a city, dresses herself up with a very heavy veil so that it's not apparent that this is his daughter-in-law, and she is attractive to him. Basically, the fact that any woman would be sitting by the roadside instead of quickly hurrying to her way would suggest that she was advertising herself for sale. And so Judah says, in essence, you want to have sex? And she says, yeah. And so he goes back off somewhere and has sex with her. We're not told of any of the details. Again, here's the family line of Jesus, Judah himself, and it's not praised at this point, but it is part of the story. And because she says, well, I think I'd like to take a small animal as a reward for this as my payment, he says, well, I don't have any with me right now. She says, well, okay, give me your signet ring and your walking stick and your sash, your rope around your waist, and then bring the animal back. And of course, then she disappears and goes back home and dresses back up as a widow and becomes pregnant with twins by that sexual activity with Judah. And when it's found out that she's pregnant, even though she's back at her father's house, Judah says, bring her out that we may kill her, burn her for what she has done. And she says, okay, that's fine with me, but the man who owns these things is the one who got me pregnant. And then his comment, you are more righteous than I. I should have given you my son. That was right, that was appropriate. But we're told he was afraid maybe she was sort of bad news and was killing her husbands off, and that Judah was afraid to lose the third son since his wife had died, and so he was hesitant to do that. The twins that are born, one of the kind of funniest little stories anywhere in the Bible about the fact that the one twin stuck his hand out a little bit and they tied a little scarlet string around his finger, and then he pulled the hand back in the womb, and Perez is born first. Perez is the one, kind of the pushy one who breaks open, and then Zerah is the word for scarlet, the color of the little string around the finger. If you look in Matthew chapter 1, you'll see that Perez and Zerah are both mentioned in the genealogy, even though Perez is the member of the family who's in the line of Jesus. But it mentions that both Perez and Zerah are born to Judah by his wife Tamar, even though that's his daughter-in-law as well. So as we come to the end of this account in chapter 38, we recognize that the four oldest sons of Judah, or of Jacob by Leah, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, have all done things against the family. Maybe not the kinds of things that we would find fault with. The children of Bilhah and Zilpah, though Leah's later children aren't mentioned, those sons are wicked against Joseph, hating him because of his prominent position with the father. and they are willing to do away with him, even though Reuben is trying to stop that. And then we find that Joseph himself gets in a bit of trouble as he sort of eggs on his brothers with these dreams, and even eggs on his father a little bit about what's going to happen. So again, not a story, not a section of the scripture that tells us about the great heroic deeds of the people. There is not much good news in these two chapters, but what we do see is a God who continues to love people and to bless them and to watch over them, even though their lives are very different from what he might want them to be. And that ongoing story of the grace of God who supports those who in no way earn it or deserve it is really part of the deeper message. We're also encouraged here to realize that God even watches over those who are threatened by family members and by others, and that in one way or another, if it is his will to get something done, he can turn those events and make them happen so that something good can come from it. And Joseph will later say, "You meant it evil to me, but God meant it unto good to save many people alive." It is also the point at which Joseph becomes very important. And so we recognize that God is watching over things, and he can make things happen according to his will, even though they might not be as apparent to all of us as we are watching. The brothers certainly at this point are not talking at all about whether they're sinning against God. That, of course, will come later, and that's part of the rehabilitation of the brothers when they finally acknowledge their own sin. Thank you for your continued study, and I pray that you also are encouraged to recognize that God's mercy and forgiveness is over all of us, and that even if our lives are not perfect, that he is with us to bless us and to help us to serve him. Thank you, and God's continued blessings to you.